Welcome to Community Forum. My name is John Gogliettino. I'm your host. This evening we're changing gears quite a bit. I don't believe since 1995 we've ever addressed this topic. Funerals. What do we do at the end of life, when the life comes to its end on this side of the universe, so to speak, because I believe in afterlife. Do we have a monument that we existed, or do we take other choices? So we're discussing this entire topic tonight. And with me from the Cornell Funeral Home is Tania Porta.
Yes.
And I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. First of all, our viewers are used to having someone tell a little bit about themselves, how long you've been in the area since you're connected there. And I know about your history.
Yes.
You might want to talk about your general history, and then we'll have a separate history maybe for the home a little bit. And then we'll get into our other prepared questions.
Good.
Yeah.
My name is Tania Porta. I was born and raised in Danbury. I went to St. Gregory the Great School, Immaculate High School, class of 1990, and I graduated from Western as well. I'm a Danbury girl. I'll die here. I'm definitely homegrown and love the community. I'm a funeral director at Cornell Memorial. I grew up in a family of funeral service. I had two wonderful examples of what funeral service is in my father, Rodney Bourdeau, and my uncle, Roger Gavigan.
Both well-known people.
Yes.
In the community.
Yes.
Okay. And tell us a little more. How old is the firm?
Well, it was founded in 1913, so we're 101 this year.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
My arthritis is kicking in.
Okay. Well, first of all, when you're approached, we talked about informally before the show started. There was a history with homes where they were like parochial years ago. In other words, you have St. Peter's at one end,
right,
and you got St. Joseph's, and you got St. Gregory's, and I'm saying that speaking as a Catholic, and then you have all the other homes in between, and it's sort of dividing up the city, and everybody it was just, I guess it evolved that way, that you went to the home closest to your house unless you had a problem with that family, and then you might go to the next one in the next precinct or the next ward, so to speak. So can you tell us about that, how that may have evolved? I know it has evolved, but whether or not, how close it is to that, or is it 70% of people doing something different now?
Well, though Danbury has grown significantly in the last 100 years, many of the families that we continue to serve today go back generations. So those roots of when families went to a particular funeral home based either on the church that they attended, whether it be the area of town of the parish they attended if they were Catholic. There were also firms that were considered more Protestant or Catholic or Jewish firms, and so that dictated where most families went. And many of those we still serve today, and they still go to their prospective funeral homes. Nationality also played a part in that in early years. There were more Irish firms or Italian firms that served those communities as well. And the same would hold true for our area historically. Nowadays, again, like I said, there are families that, you know what funeral home they're going to choose based on their connections in the community. But being that people are so transient now, there are many new people in our community that don't have that connection through the generations. And so they need to find a funeral home in which they connect with. And that's often done by word of mouth or referrals from people that they know. Nowadays as well, people just pick up the phone and start going through the yellow pages and calling funeral homes to see what options are available.
Now, there's state regulations, I know that for a fact. And is there any kind of like a fact sheet that you're sort of like required to, okay, these is like a disclosure, you need to make certain disclosures to people that are talking to you, and you know, when someone calls you or someone visits you, so to speak?
Yes, well, we are one of the most heavily regulated industries by the Federal Trade Commission. So we are required to follow the regulations set forth by the FTC. One being that if someone requests a copy of your general price list, we are required to give it to them. That price list is to be disclosed as we're asked for it.
And this is the federal government that's involved?
Yes, and there's state regulations as well.
Okay. So that makes you as close to the securities business as you can be, having all kinds of regulations like from the feds. Okay.
There's a lot of them.
Yes. And that's all consumer protection, because there have been a lot of things that are done. You're like, they said they were going to sell you a super deluxe casket, and they only sold you a wooden one.
Yes.
And they didn't see it because it was covered with the flag or whatever. And
I will say one thing for the state of Connecticut in general, in reference to protecting the consumer as far as prearranged funerals are concerned. The state of Connecticut has very strict regulations for the funeral homes to follow, and that really does protect the consumer in our state.
Okay. So do you have like a checklist or something, you know, when somebody comes to you that's not from the hood, you know, not from the neighborhood,
right?
You know, that may have been out of Danbury for 30 years or 25 years, and they left their parents here, and now one of them has passed, or they're both gone, and you know, they're okay. What do I do in the case of mom, who usually the female outlasts the male, survived by their spouse?
We can only
hope. Usually. But is there like a checklist that you go over with people like that, or you give it an idea? Are there certain questions, or is there any industry norm, I should say?
I would say from my perspective and the way that I like to be, I get the majority of my information just by having a conversation with someone. I can learn a lot just by talking about their history, what they've seen done in the past within their family, and what they think is going to bring them the greatest peace and comfort in that time. So I can't say that I have a checklist that I go through. My checklist is more mental.
Right.
And I can pull a lot in either a telephone conversation with someone or face-to-face in knowing how best to guide them.
You have an idea just talking as to whether or not, sometimes, many times they'll broach the subject that, you know, I really don't have that much money, and you know that, okay, this is not going to be somebody that's going to, like I believe in the idea of a family at least having a monument, so that there's a record aside from a town hall and those dusty old books that they still have, even though this is increasingly becoming computer orientated, but they still have those dusty books that you existed. You have a family monument in the cemetery that you know that the Smith family, you know, existed in Danbury, and it's over here on row 14 in Worcester Cemetery or whatever.
Yes.
You know, and you know, and you know, if people were thinking in terms of, hey, you can bury 6 bodies on this particular plot. If people bought it as a family, then you would have some kind of lasting monument to the family, as opposed to every family. You know, nuclear family needs to have, you know, husband and wife all the way through, and you know, with divorces and things like that, that's difficult to have the same plot. So then you get back to the extended family, and you have 6.
Right.
in many cases to a plot.
Absolutely. I think nowadays things are a little different. Historically, families lived in the community in which they were born. And so those family plots got filled. Nowadays, family members are all over the place. So if you're living in Georgia or wherever, you may not come back to be buried in the family plot because your family may want you more local to where they are. So some of that has changed. Also, with cremation becoming more and more prevalent, people have more options. They choose to scatter in areas. They choose to keep the cremated remains with them, as opposed to having them buried in the cemetery.
So what would the percentage be that how people are doing it, or is it just a case of the old-fashioned thinking, like my thinking of having a monument as opposed to people? Make it as inexpensive as possible. I'll take the remains with me.
It's not always a question of cost or being inexpensive with cremation. Many people make that choice just because that's their belief and what they want for themselves. They don't like the idea of a ground burial. Cremation can decrease the expenses significantly because you don't have the expense of opening a grave or closing a grave. You don't have to purchase a grave if you don't already have one. So it is a viable option for someone who is looking at the cost primarily. But really, I think the increase in cremation in the last couple of decades is not just a cost perspective, but people's beliefs in what they want to see happen with their body.
In other words, they have the idea of flying over Lake Candlewood and pouring it out of the airplane, or getting buried at sea.
Right.
They get it done here, but they take it somewhere.
You do have to check with your local laws before you scatter in particular areas.
Especially a drinking water area,
well,
which Lake Candlewood is not.
But any kind of a public park or federal park, you can't scatter cremated remains. Private property, you need to have permission of the property owner. So there are certain things you do have to follow in that respect.
So is there like a percentage from your experience, let's put it that way, is it going a third, is it going a half, or somewhere in between?
Just looking at my own funeral home, I think we've increased in the last 5 years. We're probably nearing 60% cremation. And that has increased quite a bit over the last, I'd say, 5 years. We've probably gone from about 40 to, or maybe we're at like 56% now.
And is portability, is that part of it? That they're living
Absolutely.
in Florida, they're living in California, or whatever, and that way it's easier for them to transport
Absolutely.
it to where they're going.
Yeah.
And then they may buy a monument there.
Exactly. And eventually, what we see also is if we have one spouse pass that wants to be cremated, they may have their cremation, and then the second spouse may want to be buried. And then, so they'll hold on to the cremated remains until the passing of the second spouse, and then they'll be interred in the cemetery together at that time. So that, we see that happening more and more. That's why I say cremation is very much a personal choice. There are times when I think it is driven by the economics of a family, but it's not always the driving force. It's more what someone's personal choice is.
And there's a little more personal service that there used to be. In other words, people coming from out of town, or they're living in even New Milford, or a little bit of a distance, but not that far. That's required on the home. Like some examples of what you may do, for a family that's coming 50 miles or whatever,
50 miles.
Or 150 miles, or further out, that let's say somebody from Florida
is making arrangements here in Connecticut.
making arrangements before they
Yes.
even get here for the ceremony and all that.
Well, that's where our advances in technology are very helpful in funeral service.
Emails and all that.
Absolutely. There's a lot we can do remotely with people in other states, and that happens very frequently where the next of kin is out of state, or even we're bringing the body from Florida or another location to Connecticut for the services.
And I'm thinking also the website, these kind of things that
Absolutely.
Some people may not have experienced.
Exactly.
I've only been doing it the last 5 years. That you light a candle,
Yes.
on the web,
Yep.
so to speak, and you can't go, or
Right.
it's a register that, hey, I noticed online that
Absolutely.
so-and-so
Yeah.
is gone. So can you,
Well, email is a big part of it when we're working with someone who can't get to us right away. We can refer them to our casket company has the option that we can send them, and they can look at caskets online as well. And then working with the obituary, even with local people, we work with the obituary by email all the time, so that we can get all the details.
is there certain rules that, let's say it's going to take a week to get the family together? There's one's in the military and he's coming on hardship leave,
Right.
and it might be 8 days. There's certain things you need to do with the body. That body definitely has to be embalmed because it's past a certain day, right?
Well, there's embalming is not a requirement. It's not a legal requirement.
I thought
No.
if it was out of the ground, it's not buried within so many days. I
Right.
thought there needed to be, I thought it was a law you had to embalm.
No, there's
Okay.
no legal requirement for embalming unless you're transporting by common carrier. Then there are certain regulations.
So if you're
that we
going
have to
over
follow.
several states with a bus or a train
Flight,
or
I would say more flight. Yes.
Flight, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
But if we just need to hold someone for an extended period so family members can gather, if we're having a closed casket service, then embalming would not be necessary. If a family wants to have an open casket for visitation, it's our funeral home's policy that the body be embalmed for their preservation and appearance when the family views. And we can usually accommodate most time periods. Every individual's chemistry is a little bit different, so it's always as the date approaches, we look for any potential issues if we should not have an open casket.
Is it common in the homes, and now you have this new creature called the corporate home, that they're an entity from some other
Yes.
state? So I imagine it's more prevalent with those homes, but are most homes designed to have like 2 funerals going on at the same time, or sometimes
Well, it really
3?
depends on the building.
It depends on the building and also the
Yes.
size of the funeral too.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, I have the ability to have 2 wakes at the same time.
That I meant the wake. Yeah.
I prefer to only have one at a time. I think it's nicer for the families. If I can't manage to have just one at a time, then I may try to stagger the hours a little bit so that we don't have both families there the whole time together.
Because it's like a strain on any facility,
Absolutely,
even if it's a bigger,
with parking and just directing families where they need to go. I like to see the family be able to relax and have use of the whole funeral home. But again, there are times when you can't accommodate that. If you have 2 families that need to have a service on a particular day, then you have to adjust. And we do that as needed. I think any funeral home, whether you're family or corporate, runs into that issue of potentially having 2 at the same time. We do what we can not to. Your mention of the corporate entities
yeah.
within funeral service is a fairly new thing. We are extremely blessed in the Danbury area to have 3 family-run funeral homes that have been here for generations. all run by very good people and serve our community well. So we're very fortunate.
So that's a good mix still. And would you say Connecticut's the same way?
Other parts of Connecticut don't necessarily have as many family funeral homes as we do here in our area. It seems to be coming in our direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the industry trends, it's pretty much holding. You know, you have family homes and you have corporate. So there's a certain, I guess, some that accommodate to the nomads are all over the place. They're living in L.A. and then the next thing they're in Texas, and then
Right.
And then you got the people with the old parochial methodology, so to speak. Would you say that what would the advantages be of a home, the family homes?
Family home.
The knowledge of the people that live in the town and
Well, often the corporate firms do have local people who work there, so they do have that base in the community. I think when someone is faced with the choice of having to choose a funeral home, the most helpful thing that they can do is open a conversation with each individual funeral home. Call around. You're going to know in a couple of minutes who's the most welcoming, who's there to support and assist you, and who you connect with on the phone. You can also stop by each funeral home and knock on the door. Most of the time we have someone there, though we prefer an appointment.
Right.
Appointments are nice, but often there's someone there that will show you around the funeral home and open a conversation with you about what you might be looking for. So I really think that, regardless of what church you attend or where you live, the most important thing is whether or not you feel a connection with the funeral home that you choose. Historically, the funeral home was meant to be an extension of your own home, because in the early 1900s, the funerals were still held within the home. By going in and getting to know the feel of the place and the people who work there, it should feel like home for you.
I still have that sense, but then again, I'm a townie in the sense that I've always been in Danbury, and
Right.
and it's like, well, he's in the Lions and he's in Kiwanis and so. You still have that connection, and the family homes, their members tend to belong to the groups.
Absolutely.
So there's still a little bit of that, but then, like you said, much of the community is moving around, and people come in and they're more likely to take those tacks, So it's good,
Yes.
each to their own, but there's still going to be people that that like that traditional
Absolutely.
approach,
Absolutely.
Not necessarily that it's 2 blocks over, but they like
Right.
that. They like that down home
Yes.
thinking. Do you have a website that you want to that may there's information for people, your own particular one?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have CornellMemorial.com
Okay.
as well as the BrookfieldFuneralHome.com. They both go to the same site.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, is there any state sites that might be informative that you're aware of that for a consumer that they might want to mention?
The Connecticut Funeral Directors Association has a website. I think they're ctfda.org.
But they can go on Google and say
Absolutely.
Repeat that again. The Connecticut
Funeral Directors Association.
and there's information there as a consumer if you want to know
Absolutely.
whatever they're saying
Yep.
and what have you. And also you can check up on who's been naughty and who's been
That's right.
whether or
You
not
can
they
check
have any
the
complaints.
license,
The
the
ca-
license of a funeral home and an individual funeral director on the Connecticut governmental website, and see if there's any complaints against them.
Right, because a complaint doesn't necessarily mean, but if they got 10 complaints, even if they haven't, that might be that there's a tendency
Exactly.
And that's
Yes.
happening.
Absolutely.
and-
I think really, talking to people and finding out what their experiences have been with the funeral home and getting that recommendation, and then again that personal connection is really very important, because you're in the most difficult time of your life when you've had a loss. So you want somebody that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, whether it's a father or a mother or a brother, a sister,
Absolutely.
Somebody that you were always close with and now
Right.
gone, and you're a little bit shocked, and it takes you a couple of
Absolutely.
days before you. So during that time, sometimes people take advantage, and it's good to have the guidance that guides you the right way, and so that you don't make the wrong choices.
Nowadays, too, people are doing a lot of pre-planning for their own funerals.
Good point.
Yeah.
What's involved with pre-planning? In other words, without saying a definite amount, but does somebody make plans at age 50 that, okay, when I go, I want to have lot 15 over here, and I want this home to do the services,
Right.
essentially?
Well, there's a couple of different ways you can pre-plan.
Okay.
Some people like to just come in and give all of their information to the funeral director. And a file is started and kept on hand with their biographical information. And we may take notes as to what their desires are, if they want to be cremated or buried, if they'd like to have a wake with an open casket, or maybe they want a wake with a closed casket. These are all decisions that someone may want to make for themselves rather than leaving that
Leaving
for
it
their
to their
child.
children
Yes.
or their
Yep.
grandchildren or whatever,
My own mother, obviously I grew up in funeral service, so we talk about funerals
Right.
more than the average person in our home.
Right.
My own mother basically pre-planned her own funeral and told my brother and my sister and myself everything that she wanted for her services, and even chose her hymns and things.
I hate to interrupt you, but
okay.
they're already starting to wave to
We've
me.
talked too much. Oh, goodness gracious.
No, you talked. It was very
Okay, good.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and I thank the viewers for tuning in to the Community Forum. Tune in next week, same time, same station, and we'll have another interesting program. Good night for now, and we'll see you then.
That went quick.
Now you stay seated until.